Right, so we're live and direct, and here I am with Lawrence Whitaker, who's one half of the Design Mechanism Publishing, who put
the less talented half as well.
Mythras, yes. Well, also, I didn't mean that. Yes, I just. But I don't know.
Gee, thanks. This is going to be a short interview.
So what did you do for Mythras? While Pete was just slaving away in between his
Pete's obviously the talented half. I get all the crap jobs like publishing the books and dealing with some of the writers and doing the sort of the businessy side, while Pete secretes himself deep in northern Sweden, builds igloos, trains with weapons, builds up his survivalist larder, and creates wonderful gaming material like Monster Island and Mythic Greece and lots and lots of little tweaks, things that we do.
Now let's dial this one back a bit because it is slightly unfair. Let's start at the beginning. How did Mythras come about, and what is Mythras for people who are completely unaware?
How did it come about? Well, first of all, Mythras is the renamed game that was RuneQuest 6th edition. Pete and I have been friends since 1992, and we've been writing and collaborating on games from the BRP family. Since the early 2000s. We were both playtesters on the Big Gold Book when Chaosium were putting that toolkit together. So we did a lot of play testing around that, and we'd collaborated, both as players and GMs on sort of many campaigns and scenarios and rules things. And we both eventually ended up working for Mongoose. I started a couple of years before Pete joined, and I was doing a lot of RuneQuest material for the RuneQuest for the Mongoose line. Pete joined, and obviously with his writing expertise and his knowledge of BRP and those systems, he as well became involved with some of those publications. So that was kind of how our professional career started. I'd obviously written stuff for Chaosium and the Eternal Champion line back in the early 1990s. So my association with writing professionally goes back quite a long way. But Pete and I joined forces after leaving Mongoose to form our own company to publish RuneQuest, because the license was released from Mongoose and it became available. We talked with Greg Stafford about this, and he was very encouraging. So we published RuneQuest 6th edition, and we built on a lot of the work that we'd done in our Mongoose writing to develop the game system that we now have. 2015, the license reverted to Chaosium. We had a 5-year deal from 2010 to 2015. So the RuneQuest trademark reverted back to Chaosium. And we thought, why let a good thing sort of lie fallow? And so we decided to rebrand those rules as Mythras and re-release the game, which we did in August of 2015, and it's been onwards and upwards since then. It's become its own thing, and I think we've got now published for Mythras way more than we ever had for RuneQuest 6, and in lots of different diverse areas as well. So for the uninitiated, we are a D100 game, very much like OpenQuest. Lots of commonalities between our two game systems. We're the crunchier side of the family.
We're the more basic.
No, you don't. OpenQuest isn't basic. OpenQuest is a very user-friendly introduction to D100 role-playing that takes a much-needed simplified route into the hobby. And I think that's an important thing to have, given the long and tangled web of games based on the common BRP system. So Mythras is very much its own thing. Loads and loads of stuff that's available for it. And we are a medium complexity, crunchy D100 system is what we are.
We're gonna. I think someone at the moment, people they want a big matrix of how the different rule sets, where they come from, and what features they have. But I think it's going to end up there's going to be somebody's just going to do the crunch scale. and the BRP games, the various sort of offshoots of Mongoose did with RuneQuest, which is now at the moment that game it's now called Legend, isn't it?
Yes. That was rebranded as Legend.
As Legend, and now that's the sort of the way that you refer to that 90s 2000s Mongoose percentile game, which I know OpenQuest used that because we used the SRD right that they produced right from the beginning. So we have our roots in Mongoose RuneQuest. And I was working on that when you were hopping on board to clean that up and do what they Mongoose RuneQuest 2.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there are a lot of good things with the Mongoose first edition of RuneQuest. There are a lot of bad things, but there was a lot to commend it. There were some very, very good ideas that just sort of got lost in the mix or weren't explored fully enough. So we took that opportunity and fixed what we could, ditched what was completely broken and couldn't be repaired, and rebuilt where we needed to. So there's still a lot in common with the first iteration of that game, but we developed it along sort of different lines, and it was well received.
I didn't get an opportunity to play that. I got, which really naffed me off.
Well, the first edition.
Got the very first edition. I took that to a convention, ran a very simple sorcerer's. Here's a sorcerer's tower. You have to get there, fight a few things if you want, and then fight your way up the sorcerer's tower. And get some runes. And everybody's like, what? Well, runes are a physical thing now. You get them on pebbles and amulets and stuff, and you can hold them in your hands and cast spells and stuff. And they were like, okay. And we played it, and it was okay. I had some TV issues with it where in play I was reading the book, and the editorial wasn't great. So there was rules referred to over here that didn't link up to the page. And it's like, okay, well, we'll put this to one side. And also, I think I was a fanatical Glantha fan at the time, which didn't do it any favours. Because I think one of the things my sort of development through the RuneQuest sort of side of things was I was a big RuneQuest 3 fanatic for years. And that was more, we got that as a just the rule books from Games Workshop, because if you're living in Britain, as I was in the time, Games Workshop did a very good job with RuneQuest 3, doing some very nice hardbacks.
I have all 5 of them on my bookshelf.
I don't. I've got I think my RuneQuest 3 is a paperback RuneQuest Deluxe from the from the early 90s.
Oh right, okay. No, I still have all the Games Workshop.
Yeah, but I've had them a couple of times, and I don't think I can justify going and being paid one last time. But you never know. But they kind of really nicely presented them and did colour artwork and really did a good job of just.
I thought some of the artwork was a little bit too Warhammerish. Some of that old John Blanche Chaos Spiky Bit style.
Oh, I like that.
Finding a Warhammer product, finding White Dwarf, but I don't think some of it. And there were a few sort of spiky stiletto wearers in there, and that always kind of jarred a little bit.
Yes,
given RuneQuest roots and the Bronze Age.
Games Workshop with their version of RuneQuest 2 did give the world the chainmail bikini, and yes, so I think with my sort of RuneQuest fanboy, I'm glad that sort of Mythras exists. It's because it for me it tidies up that whole RuneQuest 3, and I found the whole Mongoose stuff leaned heavily more towards RuneQuest 3, which I was more familiar with. I had RuneQuest 2, I'd played a bit, but RuneQuest 3 was the game that I played, deep played growing up. And you can't, obviously I don't think you could do it. It's more of a passionate thing. It's more of a sort of the layout and form rather than specific rules. Because so for instance, you've got careers and professions, haven't you? In the way of creating cat, and it is just simple. Here you get a number of numbers. You get pick your career, and you have a number of percentile points to put on your skills. depending on what question. Whereas RuneQuest 3 has a similar sort of like big profession, but it's multipliers. Which always in my head in it. It's like you've got ×5. So for every year after you have over 16, you get 5 points to, I don't know, fighting dagger or whatever. And yes, and the maths was a bit twiddly. And
you got to remember though, your pocket calculators were all the rage back then, and you had to have an excuse for breaking one out. So they were still pretty much a novelty, were pocket calculators back in those days.
Yes. I always remember the conversations I had with my dad, because my dad was an engineer, so it was just like, you don't need pocket calculator. No, you need a logarithmic.
You need a good slide rule.
Yeah.
Hang on, let me get my log table out.
So very much in spirit, and I think because Mythras is not tied to Glantha or any other sort of game, somebody said very nicely that you've got the all-in-one rule book, you get that, and then you pick up one of your wonderful campaign books, and then that's it. You've got a sort of a complete standalone game in a standalone setting. And I'm part of me, I think mainly because of the atrocities that came out in the 90s with splat books. It's like you would have it. You buy the rule book and say, "Oh, we're not going to cover this section of the rules. You have to get this supplement." Because of that, I'm like, no, I don't like that sort of. I like a nice self-contained book where if you're buying something else, it's because you like the initial game.
I think it's quite interesting that the game industry does go through trends. I mean, when GURPS first came out, there was this shift that lasted for a good 10, 15 years where you developed a core system, and then you have the supplemental add-ons that reference the core system rather than trying to publish a self-supporting game in one thing. And that kind of went on for quite a while, and that's very much the model that Mythras uses. Now, I think we've kind of come full circle. We're back to companies that are creating standalone games with all the rules complete. Now, why that is, I'm not sure. I don't know if it's down to economics, profitability, shifting attitudes and likes from players, but there is definitely a move more towards self-contained games again, rather than having your core system plus your thing. And we've experimented with that with Lyonesse, which we could have released as a Mythras.
I assumed, possibly wrongly, that was a term of the license that you had to do it as a supplement.
No. It's not there as a term of the license. We decided that we would deliberately release it as a standalone game. First of all, there'll be a lot of Jack Vance fans that are gamers that either know his work through D&D or other things that may sort of balk at, I've got to pay $50 for a Mythras book and another whatever dollars for the Lyonesse supplement. I just won't bother. We thought, let's give them a complete book. Even if we'd done it as a supplement, we'd have still, had to tailor the magic completely and said, ignore everything in the Mythras rulebook about magic because it works differently here in this setting. So it actually made sense on a number of fronts to do it as a standalone book. And I think we'll probably do more of that in the future.
I was hoping to have a copy of it today. I had a bit of a splurge last Sunday through your partner, Aeon Books.
Yeah, I've upped the deposit on the yacht. Thank you.
And that was on. That's in fact, I think it might still be on sale at 20% off. Aeon, that's aeonbooks.co.
Yes, Aeon have got it on sale at the moment.
Yep. Yeah. In fact, they've been having monthly sales of various little bits. I think one I just missed out on was getting Paul Mitchener's Saxon book, which is the companion to your Mythic Britain.
that was on offer as well.
It would be a remiss. We had a bit of a joke about earlier saying that Loz is more on the production side. That's not true. He also does write books for Mythras. He's a co-author of Mythras. He's large in there. And one of the books that he put out very early was Mythic Britain, which is King Arthur just after the end of the Roman occupation, the Celts and the Saxons, and not a knight in plate mail armor to be seen. And it's
I don't even think Lancelot doesn't even get a mention. I don't think.
Oh dear. Yeah. So yeah, that's a fantastic book there. So yes, I got Leonese, and I must admit, I did think Luther Arkwright. I was quite surprised when that was a supplement to the main rule book. But these things.
Well, Luther Arkwright's an interesting case. We've renewed the license with Brian Talbot. Plug to Brian Talbot, wonderful person to work with. He's producing a new Luther Arkwright graphic novel series next year. I think all the inking is reaching completion. So we will be reissuing Luther Arkwright next year to take advantage of that re-release or the release of the new graphic novel. We'll obviously update it to include anything that the graphic novel introduces to the canon, and we will probably make that standalone game as well.
Oh, right, that's brilliant. Yeah.
But with Arkwright, it's a bit different because it's quite a complex. I mean, you're trying to create characters that can come from anywhere in the multiverse.
Yeah.
So you can have your barbarian from this parallel dimension of Earth that never progressed beyond, say, I don't know, the Mythic Britain stage. And then the ones where science, I don't know, the Romans managed to crack the light speed barrier or something, and you've got this development strand. So you've got to be able to account for all these eventualities. So it's probably the one supplement that would really benefit from its own standalone treatment. And of course, it needs firearms rules and vehicle rules and multiverse rules and all that kind of thing. So we will look very, very seriously at reissuing the game as a standalone thing.
Excellent, yeah. So Mythras is as Loz has said, it's a standalone game, and it's a very, very handsome and well put together game. A lot of very quietly, I think it's become the gold standard of deep percentile gaming, and I must admit, when I was doing OpenQuest 3, that was the book I had to hand. So we've got to catch up, and we'll still be our own man. That was a big design goal.
Completely, yeah.
But at the same time, pull some of the production standards and the words, and the linking the words and the cross references, and making it a little bit less of a tangled mess. And hopefully I've done that. I think I have after spending 3 years editing and poring over.
It's amazing how much effort goes into just that side of things. I mean, completely set aside anything around the layout or the production standards, but just making sure that rules cross-reference properly and make sense when they do.
Yeah.
I think that's probably where Pete and I spend about 50-60% of our time, just making sure that everything lined up and worked elegantly. That's one of the things that we're working towards: efficiency and elegancy. Don't create a new subsystem where you can do it with an existing one.
Yeah.
Make sure there are common themes that run through it. Make sure everything connects in the right kinds of ways for the right reasons. And then when you're sort of writing this and you've got to put it together, I mean, crikey, the number of Skype sessions that Pete and I had, and face-to-face sessions where he would come over to my place just to sit down and go through where we'd got. And we would scrap entire chapters and rewrite them together because we'd find that something didn't work. It's a lot of work putting a rule book together that works coherently and consistently. And so I think that's probably the thing that we're most proud of. People say, isn't it time for a full Mythras second edition? I don't think it is, because there's nothing that we would want to do differently with the game at the moment.
Yeah.
That it doesn't already do very well. There's things we can tweak and things you always think, we could do that in a different way because we see a new rule by someone else that actually thinks of something we didn't think of. But by and large, we're very happy with the game's strengths and the way that it approaches the rules. I mean, we could do the presentation very differently if we wished, but the actual core rule structure we're very, very happy with. We don't think we need to, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, no. I had a real sort of down on myself because left OpenQuest to go fallow for a couple of years because I was doing other things, and my family was taking precedence. I reached a certain age where suddenly family members die or ill, whatever, and so that was a bit of a focus for a while. But when I came back to it, because I was coming back into it and having to start it all off again, it's just me doing it. Unfortunately, I don't have a writing partner, but I've got a friend Paul Mitchell who does work.
Yeah, know Paul really well.
And he's a big fan of OpenQuest, even when I'm not. And he's been he's been the voice of reason. That's why he's he's done a bit of writing for OpenQuest over the years, and suggestions all here and there. But I've given him an awful credit on this, Tom. When I was reading, I looked at Mythras because I did go. RuneQuest Glanford was amongst us. It finally got out. That was back on the scene. So, and you, when Mythras was there, and all the supplements I thought. So where does Little on Me? Am I sort of like this indie sort of, has its time come and gone? It was great in the second edition. Do we actually need a third edition? And I've done a slightly tidied up second edition, and I looked at it. And it is that sort of like wanting to forget things finally, right? And I was a bit done. I looked at your shiny wool set and I thought, oh, Mythras is so much better. That's happened by magic. And then the voice of reason finally piped in and said, no, it hasn't. It's the end of a good 10, 20 year, as you say, right at the beginning, you've got this creative partnership with Pete that stretches back in beyond the 90s. And that's all kind of gone into Mythras.
There's about 10 years of development went into all of that before we even released Mythras. I mean, a lot of the concepts that you see in the game started out either as things that we were doing as experiments when we were doing that work on the Big Gold Book for playtesting, or when we were kicking the tires on the first edition of it. For example, the combat system. Pete developed that because he didn't like the Mongoose RuneQuest 1 combat system, and he'd have this idea about using special effects in a different way as a reward for exceeding a level of skill of your opponent. And that had its genesis there. But he'd even experimented with things like the shaman rules, the animist rules, way before we even thought about RuneQuest 6 even. They weren't developed for that. They were developed for a shared world project called Gwenthia. That's right. We started developing for the Big Gold Book, which is why we were playtesting it. And all the animism rules and the mysticism rules, they have their genesis in that, not for RuneQuest 6. So we were working on all this stuff for a long, long time.
That's quite enlightening, because when obviously you did RuneQuest 6, all those rules, shamanism, mysticism, were presented as generic, and I just think, oh, those are the shamanism in Glanford, and there's mysticism in Glanford that's occasionally talked about. So surely you just map those directly, and it's like, no, that's not the case. These were written outside of that. That's interesting.
Yeah, they were.
So having a bit of a sort of fanboy moment there, kind of go, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so, very, very deliberately written for something completely different to Glorantha, and they were also kind of a response to things that we didn't like with the way that RuneQuest had handled certain things, like spirits, which very often are used as kind of PowerPoint batteries or spell batteries, rather than having a personality and a presence in the game all of their own. So we wanted to do it differently, to make a spirit something that's formidable. And be something that's more than just, hey, I've now got access to these spells and let me deplete my spirit before I use mine. We really wanted spirits to be full of flavor and reflect mythology at the same time.
Yeah, no, I'm very much against the sort of standard sort of just basically using spirits as traps and shotguns, and with. Well, Paul again, Dr. Mitch in my current campaign, which we play on Thursday nights, OpenQuest Thursday we call it. He's got a character who's basically got a shamanistic background, and from his gran has learned how to summon healing spirits and fear spirits, and the fear spirits, even though he's using it as offensive magic, it's always framed in the whole way of that the fear spirit invades the mind of whoever is possessing, and it makes, because the basic game all is they demoralize the character. So any NPC goes, oh, I want to question them. Well, I'll just set my fear spirit in, and I have to then role play this demoralized character, and I play a big tough giant. I'm a bit sad about everything. I just want to go back to sleep because I have the fear spirit fogging its mind up. So
there's a wonderful treatment of that in shameless plug coming up, Mythic Babylon, which is coming out very, very soon, which is the bad news spirit. Genuine thing. The bad news spirit, it will infect itself into someone who will go around spreading horrible news, literally go around doom mongering until they are spent. And that's the work of the bad news spirit. It's a real tangible thing, which a lovely idea.
Excellent. I know a few people have been possessed by that one in real life where I used to work.
So, there's a few doing the rounds at the moment.
I had the pleasure of a couple of years ago of playing a Mythic Babylon game at convention. I don't know what game got to Mitch again. And I don't know whether that's getting published at any way, shape or form. But basically, I was a big, hairy desert nomad who drifted into a city, and I said to Paul, I'm not really up to playing anything clever this afternoon. He passed me this character because it was Sunday afternoon at the end of the convention with far too much beer as usual. And and it was a really clever. We went to fought monsters. There was a bit of politicking about the city that we were meant to make, forming trade missions and trade routes, but we ended up somehow, my scruffy nerf herder ended up sort of being king of this city state because I got the axe of Gilgamesh. It was like, yes, this is what I want. It's big, it's mythic.
Between the Tigris and the Euphrates in that period, there were, I don't know how many cities are actually mentioned in the book, but probably around 50 or more, each of which have their own little allegiances. They're continually shifting and failing and being remade. Sometimes they support the Babylonians, sometimes they support the Elamites, and then something will come along, then they'll support neither. And it's brilliant for that kind of politicking.
I've recently caught up on a bit of YouTube. There's a wonderful YouTube channel called Failed Civilisation.
Yes, it's brilliant. I love that. I've watched that. It's great.
And they covered sort of the end of Mesopotamia, and they pointed out that even at the end, there's so many thousands of years before it.
That's it.
And it's like, whoa, that's kind of like that. I was looking back and back to them and sort of all that time, the equivalent, and so it's something that we kind of Dr. Mitch twitched about that he was doing his final read through. So this was on Wednesday. So on Thursday night when we got together with him, there was lots of teasing at the table. So is it coming out tomorrow? You finished now. Is it you that's holding it up?
A day after tomorrow.
Yeah. So for that. So what is coming out or what have you got planned on the Mythras? Because it's something. I must admit, I've had a bit of a splurge recently with Box to catch up with stuff, and quietly you've been consistently putting stuff out, and there's quite a chunk of gaming space there. So what's
we've got way more than we can possibly cover in this chat, but we do have a good year's worth of material to work on. So first priority is Mythic Babylon. That we've just had the proofreading corrections, so we're making those now. I should have those finished this weekend. Then it'll be off to get a test copy printed. Assuming all that is good, we can probably hope to see Mythic Babylon out and on sale by the end of May. All fingers crossed, all things being equal. So that's the first thing. We are preparing and laying out a classic fantasy scenario called Temple of Set, which obviously has an Egyptian feel with a name like that. That's 80-page extravaganza, which should be good for you. Lots of mummies, scarab beetles, cursors, falling blocks. You're in a pyramid. You've got to find your way out. Sand's coming in. It's wonderful stuff, Yeah,
just to sort of interject that if you're not aware, Mythras has a supplement, a couple of supplements. If you have the idea of, I like deep centaur gaming, but my gamers are all D&Ders, and then you need something familiar. Classic fantasy is basically D&D, using the Mythras rules and adapted, and the rest of it.
D&D-fies Mythras for you, absolutely. Not fifth edition D&D, but the advanced D&D first and second editions is deliberately where it's aimed, so there are some differences there. But
and
great.
There's a stack of modules, all done in sort of classic style.
9, 10 at the moment. So yes, Temple of Set is going to be forthcoming. After that, we've got 2 big things that we're working on. One of which is a superhero game called Destined. That's all the writing is finished. We're commissioning the art right now. We've got some staggering art coming in for that, and that is the Mythras rules applied to superheroes, and that's going to be a standalone game. It really does warrant it. The differences that we see in Mythras, or that we have to make to Mythras, really mean it's better to release this as its own thing. That's got a very innovative approach to powers and superpowers and how they work, which I think cures a lot of the problems that D100 games have had in dealing with superheroes and how they scale. It's still not perfect, This isn't a game that's going to handle the Thors and Galactuses and Captain Marvels of the sort of the superhero canon, but it will handle your Batmans, your Iron Mans, your Hulks, your Doctor Strangers, and things like that. So it's going to handle sort of the mid to high tier superheroes and the gritty street level ones very, very, very well indeed. And that's a work that I'm really looking forward to seeing come out.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I must be honest with that one, because I'm beginning to look into the sky, thinking that apart from, I think, sort of some of the more narrative official Marvel superheroes like Cortex, when they had the license to do Marvel superheroes, and the 80s one, the Marvel superheroes, which TSR did. I don't think you've ever any superhero game unless they kind of like define what they're doing and narrow it down. And then from what you were saying, you're not doing the god level, so to speak. Games that have kind of tried to do it all and not have that focus, apart from those 2 examples.
I think Mayfair's DC Heroes did it pretty well.
I've never managed to get all of that.
I think they managed to sort of balance everything from like Green Arrow right up to Superman.
Right.
And they did it with a logarithmic scale.
Get your slide rules out again, kids.
Well, you might. I think it was done very simply and very logically. And I think with Destined to sort of do that god tier level of superhero, we can do it, but we would need a supplement to sort of reframe the rules to do it, because I think it's easy to mix characters like that in a comic or in a film. In a role-playing game, not so much, because you will get some people left behind. I think if everybody is playing kind of like that god tier, then you can have a very enjoyable game, but everyone has to be invested in it in the same way. So that's something we will look at as a supplement for Destined later down the road.
Excellent. So that sounds cracking.
So we have that. And Mythic Polynesia, we've got another Mythics book just going into production. We'll be starting to commission art for that.
I heard a rumor on the internet. Just can you confirm this? Are you doing a Mythic Wales?
Mythic Gwynedd.
So that what's that, a sort of medieval period to go?
No. It's all part of Mythic Britain.
Yes,
it is set in the Kingdom of Gwynedd, which is kind of the western half of Wales in our campaign setting, which is a number of warring. Then it's very tribalistic. They were never really conquered by the Romans, so they kind of went their own merry way. And you've got lots of tribal feuding. The Irish have sort of been invading and raiding, and they've managed to establish their own colonies and tribes there as well. So you've got lots of little feuds going on between these people. So it deals with that as a separate area of Mythic Britain, very much as we did with our Waterlands supplement for Mythic Britain, which concentrated on East Anglia, kind of gone to the other end of the country, the other side of the country, and taking the same approach. So there's a lot of campaign information packed into a very, very small space, and it's written by the same author, Mark Shirley. So yes, Mythic Gwynedd will be a release probably next year, I would think.
Excellent, because I tend to go on holiday. One of those going to go to Wales on holiday, and I pick up books and from the local history type things, and there's a lot of stuff which obviously doesn't get much airtime here in merry England. Really, and as you mentioned, the whole sort of the Romans never really took over. They just built a few forts here, there, and on the tops of the hills, and stayed out of the valleys where they tended to get ambushed and things like that. So yeah, it's always struck me as an interesting one. So I had a rumor that it was being done.
It's definitely there. We have a manuscript. It's all complete.
Excellent.
That will be going into editing probably in about a month, I think.
Brilliant stuff. So right, so we've been waffling on for quite a while. So anything you want to say before we wrap up and say bye to the folks?
I just want to offer my congratulations on the successful Kickstarter for OpenQuest. I'm really looking forward to it coming out, and it's an important and valuable member of the D100 RPG family, and I'm pleased that you've reinvigorated the license. I'm very much looking forward to see what you do with OQ and where it goes. We see each other as brothers and complementary systems. And you and I have known each other a long time. We have friendly rivalry, given that I'm a Yorkshireman and you're not. And I think that nicely reflects in the OpenQuest Mythras relationship.
Yes, we'll be doing Mythic Lancashire.
Yeah, someone needs to. Yeah.
Well, I'm doing a game based around sort of mythic Pennines.
Well, you mean it isn't a myth? That's.
But yeah, no, I'm at the stage now. This is the lovely cover behind me, and I'm waiting for a proof copy, and that's where I'm at. And then I'm going to sort of prepare it so you'll be able to get hold of copies from Lulu, from Drive-Thru as a pod copy, and also as a digital print one, which means it's going to have ribbons and end papers, and that's going to be a limited print run. I'm about to open pre-orders on that if you didn't pick up a copy in the Kickstarter. A bit of blurb there, and it's got colour plates.
May have to plump for one of those.
Yeah, colour plates from all about. One thing the Kickstarter paid for was about 6 supplements. Everything from OpenQuest Dungeons, which is my kind of take on if you've got friends who play D&D, how do you lure them into playing Team Percentiles and sell them on the glorious list? And I think I'm doing that more than a sort of like this is how you level up, and sort of it's a very different approach to classic fantasy. And then I've got a new version of the Savage North, which is sort of like barbarians, Conan with the serials filed off, basically. And all the way up to the Book of Duck, which is going to be, on one hand, it is if you like ducks as a comedy fantasy race. Yes,
it's never been done in a fantasy game of ducks.
Pardon?
I've never been done in a fantasy game of ducks.
Yes, yes, but it also is also in a more serious way is how we're going to do non-human races in OpenQuest, and sort of like a quick way of doing that, and sort of wacky fantasy system. But yeah, so there's lots of stuff. I'm invigorating it, the whole thing, and we've got other things coming out, so to speak, in next year. I think Paul's doing the Four Emperors, which is the period after Nero kills himself, and 4 emperors in quick succession. I think that there's a 5th one as well tacked on right at the end, and these 4 generals, and basically Nero kills himself, and these provincial emperor generals go, I'm going to go to Rome with my army, and this whole period where things, the whole Roman world is shaken up.
And there's one of the episodes of the Fall of Civilizations podcast deals with exactly that era, if I remember rightly. A lot of good information in there about what happened after the fall of Nero.
Yeah, so there's that, and for a bit further out, we are thinking about River of Heaven and what we're doing with that, and yes, and other things. But I can't say too much because the Kickstarter did. If you got on the Kickstarter, blimey, you're getting a large amount of bang for your buck on that one. And
Absolutely.
quite confident that I've got all the covers done by John Hodgson, and yeah, they've all got certain amount of the manuscript written.
Have someone managed to clone John finally? Because the amount of stuff that he's working on is just frightening. I think he's now more than one person.
Yeah, he's. I used to worry that I'd ask him. I'd send him sort of these little emails saying, "John, have you got time to do this?" And he'd go, "Yeah, I could do it." Sort of in 6 months' time, and now it's sort of like, I can do it just between now and tea time. He's got a great group of people. This is Handiwork, John Hodgson, who's now Handiwork Games, putting out Beowulf, and I'm hopefully going to have him on as well to have a chat.
Definitely. Well. I will be tuning in. I've got my digital copy of Beowulf. I'm looking forward to the print edition arriving.
Yeah. I've got, we kind of blundered into this one. Sort of accusing Lords of doing very little towards Mythras, except the boring bits. But the plan is each of these shows is I will chat to people I know. Who I normally meet at conventions, but because of the current situation and because people have moved to other countries.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah, John's up in Scotland now, so we don't get to see one over at the conventions we used to go to 20 years ago. So this is a good opportunity to have a chat. Right then, I shall round things up now. But Loz, it's been lovely to speak to you.
It's been great. Always is new.
And I hope if the viewers and the listeners, if you're listening to it on audio only, will get something out of this. And I'll put the show notes and links to things. I think that's what you do. This is the first episode of this. So. And so thank you for coming on.
Let Google's transcription YouTube's transcription algorithms handle all of that.
Does it do Lancashire?
Will it do Lancashire? Should anyone do Lancashire? Really, is the question you should be asking yourself.
It depends
Just come back over the
whether Yorkshire folk have programmed it. Probably not. Take care. Right, see you everybody. Bye.
Have a great weekend. You take care, mate.
Bye.